5:12 local time, Northern Arabian Sea. The surface is smooth, the wind is light, and visibility stretches almost endlessly across the horizon. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced aircraft carrier ever built, moves through open water at a steady 18 knots. From far away, she barely seems to move at all. A 100,000-ton steel island gliding quietly across the deep blue sea. On the flight deck, the first cycle of the morning is getting underway. Deck crews move carefully between parked F/A 18 Super Hornets, securing equipment and preparing the day's first patrol launch. Everything above deck looks controlled and routine. But below, inside the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere is beginning to shift. The radar screens glow with the steady rhythm of a carrier strike group at sea. Green sweeps roll across the displays. Dozens of contacts move across the digital map. Commercial routes, distant cargo ships, fishing boats scattered far across the water. Then a new contact appears. Bearing 041, range 28 nautical miles. One radar operator leans closer to the screen, a surface contact. Seconds later, another mark appears behind it. Then a third. 3 vessels, tight formation, speed 16 knots. At first, nothing about that speed stands out. It could easily be normal naval patrol movement, but the heading is different. All 3 vessels are moving directly toward the strike group. The system begins comparing their signatures. A few moments later, the identification appears on the display. Iranian Navy. Inside the CIC, no one raises their voice. They do not need to. The officer of the watch marks the track. 3 Iranian naval units, bearing steady. On the bridge, the information arrives instantly through the ship's internal network. Outside, the scene remains unchanged. The sea is calm. The carrier continues forward. But inside the ship, every sensor is now focused on those 3 contacts. At 5:14, the radar updates again, speed increasing. The Iranian vessels move from 16 knots to 21, then to 24. Their formation tightens instead of spreading out. The 3 ships draw closer together, shaping into a shallow triangle as they continue closing the distance. One of the CIC supervisors studies the screen. Their course has not changed. They are still coming straight in. At 22 nautical miles, the strike group begins the first step of standard maritime procedure. A radio message is sent across open frequencies. Iranian naval vessels approaching United States carrier strike group. This is a U.S. Navy vessel operating in international waters. Adjust course immediately and maintain a safe distance. The message carries across the water. No response. The Iranian ships continue forward. On the radar display, their speed rises again. 27 knots. That is no longer ordinary patrol movement. That is an intercept profile. Inside the CIC, the watch team adjusts without a single shouted command. More data appears across the displays. Long-range optical systems turn toward the approaching vessels. Electronic sensors begin recording their signals. At 5:16, the distance drops to 19 nautical miles. Then the radar operators notice something else. One of the Iranian vessels has activated its surface search radar. The signal appears on the electronic monitoring display like a narrow line of static. They're scanning us. The words move quietly through the room. That means they are measuring range, speed, and heading in detail. The officer of the watch gives a small nod. Log it. Above them, the bridge stays calm. The captain stands behind the forward windows, binoculars raised toward the horizon. From this range, the Iranian ships are still invisible to the naked eye, hidden beyond the curve of the Earth. But the carrier's sensors see them clearly. At 5:17, the Iranian vessels accelerate again, 30 knots. For ships of their size, that is near maximum power. The triangular formation sharpens. Each hull angles slightly inward toward the center of the strike group. This is no longer routine observation. This is pressure. Inside the Combat Information Center, a new signal suddenly rises across the electronic display. It is different from the previous radar. Stronger. More focused. A narrow beam system. The technician leans toward his console. Precision tracking radar detected. That changes the entire situation. A search radar watches. A precision tracking radar measures with intent. For a moment, the room becomes completely still. The officer of the watch checks the range counter. 16 nautical miles. Closing fast. He reaches for the intercom. Bridge, CIC, Iranian Surface Group has activated precision tracking radar. There is a brief pause. Then the captain's voice returns, calm and controlled. Understood. The carrier strike group begins moving into a higher defensive posture. Above on the flight deck, the pace begins to change. Deck crews move quickly around the waiting fighters, checking lines, clearing equipment, and preparing for what might come next. Nearby, a Seahawk helicopter starts to spin up, its rotors slowly building into a steady blur. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tension sharpens in an instant. One of the radar operators leans toward his screen. Launch activity detected. The display confirms it almost immediately. Infrared sensors pick up 3 sudden bursts of heat rising from the decks of the Iranian vessels. For a brief moment, they appear only as bright thermal signatures. Then, the system draws their paths. 3 inbound anti-ship missiles. Low altitude, heading straight toward the strike group. The operator reacts without hesitation. Inbound threats confirmed. And in that moment, the quiet calm of the Arabian Sea is gone. Somewhere beyond the horizon, 3 fast-moving missiles are now closing in on the most powerful aircraft carrier on the planet. 5:19 local time. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Gerald R. Ford, 3 missile tracks cut across the radar display. Thin red lines move rapidly over the digital ocean map, staying low above the water and closing the distance second by second. Sea skimming profile. Speed just under Mach 1. The officer of the watch turns toward the console. Confirm tracks. The radar operator answers immediately. 3 inbound missiles, bearing 041, range 14 miles. At barely 30 feet above the waves, the missiles are flying low enough to blend into the clutter of the ocean surface. The method is clear. Stay low, stay fast, and reduce the defender's reaction time to almost nothing. But the carrier strike group has already detected them. High above the fleet, an E-2D Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft catches the launch signatures moments after ignition. Its powerful radar scans far across the sea, feeding data directly into the Aegis defense network surrounding the strike group. Inside CIC, the computers begin calculating intercept paths immediately. Time to impact, 90 seconds. The destroyer screen responds before the missiles are even visible from the carrier. 8 miles ahead of the Ford, the USS Arleigh Burke shifts from routine patrol to full defensive readiness. Deep inside the ship, the vertical launch system comes alive. Hatches open along the forward deck as the tactical network sends the command. Engage. 2 SM-2 Standard missiles ignite inside their launch cells. From the bridge of the carrier, sailors see twin columns of flame rise from the destroyer's bow as the interceptors leap into the morning sky. For a moment, they climb almost straight upward, white trails cutting through the air. Then they turn. Guided by shared radar data from the entire strike group, the interceptors arc toward the incoming tracks. Inside CIC, the countdown begins. SM-2 away. The first interceptor meets one of the incoming missiles thousands of feet above the ocean. On the radar screen, the contact blooms into static and vanishes. 1 track disappears. 2 remain. The surviving missiles adjust automatically, dropping even closer to the ocean surface as they continue forward. At that height, the curve of the Earth and the movement of the waves make detection more difficult with every second. Range, 8 miles. Impact time, 40 seconds. The carrier's layered defense moves to the next stage. Another destroyer in the screen, USS Mason, locks onto the 2 remaining inbound tracks. ESSM ready. The evolved Sea Sparrow missiles are built for this exact moment. Fast, agile interceptors designed to stop threats that slip past the outer defensive ring. 2 more launch cells open. A pair of interceptors streak away from the destroyer, leaving twisting trails of white vapor behind them. Inside CIC, the radar operator follows the closing geometry on the screen. Intercept in 5, 4, 3. A bright flare blooms across the radar display. Another inbound track disappears. Only 1 remains. Now the numbers begin falling almost too quickly to follow. Range, 4 miles. Time to impact, 15 seconds. The last missile is skimming just above the waves, locked onto the carrier's enormous radar signature. At this distance, the destroyers no longer have enough time to stop it. The final layer of defense now belongs to the carrier itself. On the forward section of the USS Gerald R. Ford, the Phalanx close-in weapon system turns toward the approaching threat. The white radar dome mounted near the carrier's superstructure rotates with mechanical precision. Inside the mount, the 6-barrel 20mm cannon begins to spin, building into a high-pitched metallic whine. Target locked. Range 1,500 yards. The system opens up. The sound cuts through the morning air. A fierce mechanical roar as a stream of rounds tears across the sky. From the flight deck, sailors watch glowing tracer lines stretch out over the water, forming a bright path toward the incoming missile. The missile enters the defensive stream. For a fraction of a second, it keeps coming. Then it breaks apart. A burst of flame flashes above the sea less than 1,000 yards from the carrier's bow. Fragments scatter across the water and fall harmlessly into the waves. The final inbound threat is gone. Inside CIC, the radar operator finally exhales. All 3 tracks neutralized. But the relief lasts only a moment. The radar picture updates again. The 3 Iranian warships are still moving closer. This time, the infrared sensors detect something even more alarming. Fresh heat signatures appear along their decks. Their launch rails are opening again. The officer of the watch leans toward the display. 3 new signatures ignite almost at the same time. Another volley. 3 more missiles rise from the Iranian ships, their engines glowing bright as they climb briefly before dropping low toward the ocean surface. The radar operator reacts instantly. Second wave inbound. Across the carrier strike group, alarms sound once again. And now everyone understands the situation clearly. This is no longer a test of distance or pressure. The strike group is under direct attack. 5:21 local time. The second wave appears on radar before the smoke from the first intercept has even faded from the horizon. 3 new missile tracks streak across the display, flying low and fast above the sea. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard USS Gerald R. Ford, the digital map flashes red again as the incoming vectors update second by second. Range, 16 nautical miles. Time to impact, just over 1 minute. But this time, the carrier strike group is already reacting ahead of the threat. High up the fleet, 2 F/A-18 Super Hornets circle in a combat air patrol pattern. They launched earlier for routine overwatch, but their mission changes instantly. The lead pilot hears the call in his headset. Multiple inbound threats. Vector 042. His radar screen fills with 3 small returns racing toward the strike group. Then another contact appears behind them. Fainter, higher, moving slower. Inside the E-2D Hawkeye, the weapons systems officer identifies it first. Iranian targeting drone. The small aircraft is flying several thousand feet above the missile path, acting as a relay platform. From that altitude, it can track the carrier's position and send course updates to the missiles below. Without that relay, the missiles lose a critical part of their guidance. Inside the Super Hornet cockpit, the lead pilot adjusts immediately. Contact confirmed. He banks hard right, drops altitude, and accelerates toward the drone. His speed passes 500 knots as the ocean races beneath him in streaks of deep blue and white foam. His wingman stays close behind. Back inside the carrier's CIC, the defensive network continues calculating intercepts. Destroyers prepare their missile batteries once again, but the air wing is already moving first. The Super Hornet's radar locks onto the drone. Distance 18 miles. The pilot arms his weapon. AIM-120 selected. The drone keeps circling above the missile tracks, holding a steady pattern, unaware that a fighter is rapidly closing the gap. The pilot steadies his aim. Fox 3. The AIM-120 Amram leaves the Super Hornet's wing in a sharp burst of flame, accelerating into the sky and climbing toward the high-altitude contact. A few seconds pass, then the radar return vanishes. High above the sea, the Iranian drone breaks apart into scattered fragments. Back inside CIC, the tactical display updates immediately. The incoming missiles lose their mid-course guidance. Without the drone sending fresh targeting corrections, their flight paths begin to drift. One missile pulls several degrees away from its original course. Another starts to wobble slightly just above the waves. But they are still a serious threat. At sea-skimming altitude, even a missile with unstable guidance can still reach the carrier if it gets close enough. The destroyers in the strike group respond again. 2 ESSM interceptors launch from the USS Mason, racing toward the remaining tracks. The first incoming missile is intercepted 6 miles from the carrier. Seconds later, the second disappears in a bright flash over the ocean. Only one remains, but now its path is unstable, weaving slightly left and right as its seeker struggles to find the carrier's radar signature again. Inside the second Super Hornet, the wingman watches the final missile track on his display. "I've got visual." He pushes the throttle forward. The fighter surges ahead, dropping to just 200 feet above the waves. The pilot lines up behind the missile, closing fast. From the cockpit, it looks like a white streak cutting across the surface of the sea. He steadies the aircraft and selects his weapon. Sidewinder. The AIM-9X tone sounds in his headset as the infrared seeker locks onto the missile's hot engine plume. He fires. The Sidewinder launches cleanly and races forward. 5 seconds later, it reaches the target. A flash bursts just above the water, scattering debris across the ocean's surface. The second wave is gone. Inside CIC, the radar picture clears once again. But the operators are already focused on something even more urgent. The 3 Iranian warships are still closing. Distance, 13 miles. Speed, 31 knots. Their launch rails are still hot. The carrier strike group has stopped 2 full salvos, but the situation is not over. High above the fleet, the 2 Super Hornets bank hard and turn back toward the Iranian ships. From this altitude, the pilots can finally see them with their own eyes. 3 gray hulls cutting across the water at full speed, with fading smoke trails still rising from their launchers. Then the captain's voice comes across the command network. "Enough!" The posture of the strike group changes immediately. Until now, every move has been defensive. Every action has been focused on protecting the carrier and stopping the incoming threat. Now, the mission changes. The order is clear. Disable the launch platforms. the Super Hornet pilots roll their aircraft into a steep descent and accelerate toward the warships below. For the first time since the first missile launch, the fight is moving from defense to direct response. 5:25 local time. The two F/A-18 Super Hornets drop out of their holding pattern and descend toward the sea. Altitude falls quickly, 5,000 feet, 3,000, 1,000. Below them, the Arabian Sea stretches in every direction, calm and almost unreal in its silence. But ahead, 3 Iranian warships are carving sharp wakes across the water, still charging toward the carrier strike group at full speed. Inside the lead Super Hornet, the targeting display stabilizes. 3 surface contacts. Range, 12 miles. The pilot angles the aircraft slightly left, giving the radar a cleaner picture. The system locks onto the ships almost instantly. Each hull appears as a sharp signature against the moving clutter of the sea. Behind him, his wingman sees the same thing. 3 contacts locked. Back aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, the order moves across the encrypted strike group network. Neutralize the launch platforms. There is no hesitation. The Super Hornet's weapons panel lights up. A GM-84 Harpoon selected. The missile is built for this exact mission. Low-flying, radar-guided, and designed to reach hostile surface vessels before they can react. The lead pilot steadies the jet. Speed, 540 knots. Altitude, 300 feet. At that height, the aircraft is barely above the water, with the ocean rushing beneath the canopy in a blur of blue and white. Target range drops fast, 9 miles. The radar locks onto the lead Iranian warship, the same vessel tied to the first missile launch. The targeting box turns solid. The pilot presses the trigger. Fox! A harpoon drops smoothly from beneath the wing and ignites a fraction of a second later, its motor pushing it forward across the sea. Almost immediately, it descends to a razor-low flight path, barely 20 feet above the water, as its radar seeker locks onto the large metal signature of the lead Iranian vessel. The Super Hornet breaks away sharply as soon as the missile clears the aircraft. Behind him, the second pilot lines up his own target. Second harpoon away. Now, 2 missiles are racing just above the surface, blending into the ocean's radar clutter and giving the ships ahead only moments to react. On board the Iranian vessels, the warning comes too late. The lead ship's radar catches a brief return, but at such a low altitude, the crew has only seconds. Sailors on deck turn toward the horizon. Then the first harpoon arrives. It strikes the starboard side of the lead vessel just above the waterline. The impact tears through the outer hull, sending a powerful burst of flame and smoke outward as the internal compartments are overwhelmed. Fire rises from the deck and the ship begins leaning to port, smoke pouring from damaged structures. But the response is not over. 3 seconds later, the second harpoon reaches the next Iranian warship. It hits near the aft launcher section. The impact triggers a chain reaction through the rear of the vessel, sending a large column of fire and black smoke into the air. The shockwave rolls across the water as the ship's stern disappears behind a wall of smoke. Inside the Super Hornet cockpit, the lead pilot glances down at the scene below. 2 ships are out of the fight, but the third vessel is still moving. Instead of slowing, it turns hard to port and tries to pull away from the strike group. Its speed climbs past 30 knots as the crew attempts to leave the engagement area. Back inside the Combat Information Center aboard the carrier, the radar operators follow the maneuver. Third vessel changing course, but the ship is already being tracked from above. An MH-60R Seahawk helicopter has moved into position, holding steady over the water. Its sensors lock onto the fleeing vessel and send precise coordinates into the strike group's tactical network. Seconds later, another ship in the formation responds. From the forward deck of the guided missile destroyer USS Mason, a launch cell opens. A single interceptor rises in a bright column of flame, climbing almost vertically before turning toward the horizon. Guided by the Seahawk's targeting data, it races across the sea toward the final Iranian ship. The vessel continues its hard turn, engines pushing at full power as the crew tries to outrun the incoming strike. But the missile closes the distance quickly. Less than 30 seconds later, it reaches the target. The missile hits near the center of the ship, sending a heavy blast through the vessel's internal structure. Fire pushes upward through the deck, and thick black smoke spreads across the surface of the sea. Within moments, the ship begins losing speed. Then it comes to a complete stop. High above the area, the 2 Super Hornets turn back toward the carrier strike group. Below them, the picture is clear. 3 Iranian warships have been disabled. 2 are burning heavily. The third is drifting motionless on the water. The attack that began only minutes earlier now fades into an uneasy silence, broken only by the sound of fires and the low movement of the sea around the damaged vessels. But aboard the carrier strike group, no one celebrates. Because the mission is not about celebration. The mission is control. And for now, the sea belongs to the fleet again. 5:28 local time. The flashes fade across the surface of the Arabian Sea. Smoke rises in 3 dark columns above the water, drifting slowly with the morning wind. Debris floats between the damaged hulls of the Iranian ships. Their engines are silent now, and their wakes slowly disappear into the calm ocean. From 10,000 feet above, the two F/A-18 Super Hornets circle the area in wide arcs. The pilots scan the scene through their targeting systems. All 3 vessels are disabled. One is leaning heavily to port, with flames rising from the launcher deck. Another is badly damaged near the stern, its rear section collapsed into twisted metal. The third sits motionless, smoke rising through openings across the center of the hull. Inside the lead fighter's cockpit, the pilot sends the update. 3 targets neutralized. Back aboard the USS Gerald R. Forward, the report reaches the Combat Information Center within seconds. Radar operators confirm the same picture across their screens. All 3 surface contacts have stopped moving. Speed, 0 knots. No new radar activity, no launch signatures, no further movement. The officer of the watch gives a single, controlled nod. Threat neutralized. Across the carrier strike group, the tension that has gripped every compartment for the last 15 minutes begins to ease. But the fleet does not stand down. Not yet. Post-engagement procedures begin immediately. High above the formation, the E-2D Hawkeye continues sweeping the horizon with its powerful radar, searching for any additional aircraft, ships, or unusual movement approaching the area. Nothing appears. Electronic monitoring systems scan the spectrum for fresh signals. Silence, no further Iranian transmissions, no new radar locks, no signs of another wave. On the carrier's flight deck, another MH-60R Seahawk lifts into the morning air. Its rotors cut through the ocean wind as it turns toward the damaged vessels in the distance. The helicopter crew begins recording the scene. Infrared cameras capture the heat rising from the disabled ships. High-resolution optics zoom in on damaged decks, broken structures, and smoke drifting above the water. Every image is time-stamped, geolocated, and sent directly back into the strike group's intelligence network. In modern naval operations, documentation matters almost as much as firepower. Back on the carrier's bridge, the captain lowers his binoculars. Through the glass, he can barely make out the dark smoke rising over the horizon. The entire engagement lasted less than 15 minutes. 3 missile waves. 3 launch platforms disabled. The captain speaks into the command circuit, his voice calm and measured. Log the engagement. Inside CIC, every detail is recorded with exact precision. Time of first launch, intercept sequence, air wing response, final target status. Every radar track is saved, every decision is documented, every second is preserved in the system. Because inside a carrier strike group, nothing is left to memory. The Super Hornets make one final pass over the disabled ships before turning back toward the fleet. Their engines roll across the sky as they accelerate toward the carrier. Within minutes, the massive flight deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford appears beneath them, stretching across the sea like a floating runway. One by one, the fighters line up for recovery. The first jet touches down, catches the arresting cable, and comes to a sudden stop. Then the second follows. Deck crews move in quickly, guiding the aircraft into position as engines wind down. The pilots climb out, helmets in hand. No one cheers. There are no celebrations, only quiet focus. Because for the sailors aboard the strike group, this is not a story about victory. It is a reminder of something far more important. An aircraft carrier is never truly alone. The Gerald R. Ford may be the largest and most advanced warship ever built, but its strength comes from the network around it. Destroyers with layered defensive systems, aircraft watching the sky from hundreds of miles away, fighters able to reach threats beyond the horizon, helicopters, satellites, sensors, and command networks all feeding information into one coordinated force. When those 3 Iranian warships launched their missiles, they were not challenging a single vessel. They were facing an entire fleet, and a fleet responds as one. The Seahawk circles once more above the disabled ships before turning back toward the carrier. Behind it, 3 damaged vessels drift silently on the open water, their movement gone, their wakes fading into the sea. Slowly, the smoke begins to spread and thin across the horizon. Within the carrier strike group, operations continue. Jets refuel, radars scan. Sailors return to their stations. The flight deck resets. The mission goes on. Because out here, far from the coastline, nothing truly stops. The ocean may look calm again, but every sailor in the strike group understands the reality. At sea, the next threat can appear without warning. And when it does, the fleet will be ready.